Today, we're going to celebrate our coalition. We're going to celebrate our volunteers, our community partners, and you're going to hear from a few of them now on why they chose to be a part of the Hancock County Tobacco-Free Coalition.
So I became a member of the coalition because of all of the valuable information that I learned from Brandy Baston. She has a way with really explaining things that I never knew about tobacco and nowadays vaping. So just for the education and awareness.
I first got exposed to the tobacco control movement when the city of Greenfield was considering a smoke-free workplace ordinance here in Greenfield. And my dad actually took me to the city council meeting where it was being heard. He wanted me to get an experience of witnessing that kind of thing and seeing all kinds of people speak up about it. And it was a really empowering and eye-opening experience for me to watch that. It was kind of like my first experience of watching government and democracy in action, so that was really cool for me. But it also opened my eyes to this issue as a public health issue more broadly, and it was something I got really passionate about when I was in high school, and it was kind of a focal point of some of the work that I did, especially framing it in the context of smoke-free public workplaces. It really just seemed unfair to me that people could be put in a situation where their public health was, or where their health was in jeopardy just by going to work and doing what they needed to do to earn a paycheck and provide for their families.
Well, I'd say my biggest reason was once I actually started participating in some of the cessation classes, I really enjoyed doing that, and I met a lot of nice people doing that. That was probably the best motivator for me anyway. I'll put it that way. That's probably the best way to put it. Well, I think one thing I was pretty much had decided I was really ready to quit, and my wife happened to see the ad in the newspaper for the coalition, or for the cessation classes rather, and said, I said, well, okay, I'll try that. So off we went, and on the 6th of December, it'll be 18 years ago in December, I put them down and I haven't picked them up since. I guess it kind of reinforced the way I felt about the fact that I'd smoked all those years and I'd finally decided to quit. I think it sort of supported you and reinforced you a little bit, because every once in a while you'll have those weak moments. But I will say, I've had some of the people that went through the classes say, we really appreciate the fact that you took the time to come in here and talk to us.
Well, one of the biggest reasons is the partnership between our two coalitions. We do a lot of work together, and a lot of the prevention work kind of covers not just nicotine, but we do it all. We cover nicotine, alcohol, marijuana, all the other drugs, but the prevention work really crosses those lines. Many of the programs we do aren't just based on one single drug, but it's designed to actually stop youth from using any of the drugs, and nicotine being one of those easiest to get for kids in the community because it's around parents' houses, friends have it, neighbors have it. It's kind of like alcohol. Wherever you look, it's easy to get, and that's why those are two of the most abused drugs by teenagers, because when access is high, the teenage usage rates will be much higher.
I can't remember, exactly who stopped me in the hallway or talked to me. You probably did. Heard about it, felt like it was something I really believe strongly in, and that we need to help people get free of this and live long and I think happier lives with that. So to me, it was a pretty easy step to come on board and support the coalition's work.
So Voice is a advocacy program statewide and nationwide through other states as well, and we promote a happy and healthy tobacco-free lifestyle. As a high school student, you're faced with a lot of tobacco users, unfortunately, vapes, nicotine products, etc., and it's become a pretty nationwide epidemic, and so our goal is to help advocate for a lifestyle without this and help promote change for other students and teens as well as adults too.
Smoking has always been an issue in schools, particularly middle-level schools. That's where kids begin testing their boundaries. And from day one, I've worked with middle-level learners here in Hancock County since 1984. And from day one, smoking has always been an issue. And we often dealt with it through a punitive approach, suspending kids, potentially expelling them. Well, taking education away from a student is not going to be an appropriate solution to a student who's smoking, particularly one who's addicted to nicotine. So when the coalition came about, I was very happy to become involved because they provided some other non-punitive ways for us to begin to address students who were smoking, interested in nicotine, and or addicted to nicotine.
So 20 years ago, when this opportunity opened up at Hancock Health, I never in a million years thought that I would spend 2 decades in the field of tobacco control. But it's something, once I got started, I became even more passionate about, saw the amount of work that needed to be done, and the collaboration of our Hancock Health and our community and our coalition to make a positive difference. And so 20 years later, to see how things have changed, the community has become healthier, people have been engaged, people spoke up to have a voice in an important issue in the community. I truly believe that the coalition programming has saved lives. So over the last 20 years, we've seen a lot of faces be a part of our coalition as members, as community advocates, as grassroots supporters, and also our policymakers. Let's hear from a few of them on how they've been involved in supporting this work in Hancock County and our state.
I joined before it became a coalition. It was either in 2000 or 2001 when Bobby Keene was at the hospital that he called me and said, "We're getting money." And I said, "Okay, who's we?" He said, "Tobacco." He says, "We need to go to a meeting to discuss this money and what it's going to be used for and how we're going to utilize it." So I attended a meeting with Bobby and with Hank Wolfup. And the only thing that meeting did was open up 8,000 questions, and the state had no answers as of yet. But Bobby's real vision with the tobacco money was creating a coalition that would work to educate, provide intervention, and also treatment for tobacco-related problems, because he really believed that tobacco was a gateway drug and that it was at the real center of the health crisis issue that we have in our country. So he was very determined to be a part of that and to set up something that was going to be able to stand the time, so to speak.
One of the reasons that I love and have stayed in tobacco control work and see its value in the state of Indiana is, there are proven evidence-based strategies that we know work, that we're all working at the state, local, national levels to really implement. And, if we can work on these things in tobacco control, we can apply them to so many other areas of health, community health, sustainability. And, if we've got good health, good healthy citizens, community members, then we're going to be able to have a healthier Indiana, a better Indiana. If, you're a strong, healthy individual or a strong, healthy community, you're able to, contribute uniquely and serve others. And so, a strategy through health is really important to not only the current state of Indiana, but certainly the future of Indiana.
In recent years, we've worked with some of the local congregations through our Hancock County, our Hancock Health Congregational Network to get an opportunity to have a voice in the youth programming. And so we've been able to work with some churches that are willing to have us in and talk about this and kind of as a part of their total call to their young people about being stewards of their lives and their bodies and that. So that's been one thing that I hope we can continue and do more and more of that.
So I've been fortunate to be involved in the tobacco retail audit, and that means that I go around to stores in the community, gas stations, grocery stores, convenience stores, liquor stores, and assess what is available in regards to tobacco products and their pricing. and advertising. So that's been very eye-opening. It's actually I've been pleasantly surprised by the results in that, because I'm more aware when I go to other counties, and I notice that in other counties, the availability and visibility of tobacco products is way more than here in Hancock County, so I'm proud of that.
When I was in the legislature, I served on the health committee for all 24 years. And having majored in science, I just was really interested in all things health related. And I think there's nothing more important that the legislature had to deal with was the smoking issue from a lot of standpoints, from a health standpoint, from an economic standpoint, as far as companies and business and time lost for employees and so forth. Well, my role varied over the years, and this was not something that we worked on just 1 or 2 years. This was a real process, and it worked. I can't even remember how many years, but finally, of course, in the end, we were successful with some things. But initially, we dealt with things like displaying tobacco products in front of the counter where kids could get hold of them. Proximity to schools and churches and those sorts of things. And we didn't have a whole lot of success. Finally, tobacco products ended up behind the counter. We dealt with issues of employment, trying to get insurance lowered for those people that didn't smoke. We tried to get employers to make that a criteria whether for employment.
I believe we've worked with the Tobacco Free Coalition since the inception. The partnership is important to us because of all the great opportunities it provides our students and the education it provides our students. One of the things that we have just this year is our voice group provided the opportunity to go down to the State House and help to advocate to our lawmakers. This is something that not all of our kids are able to do every day. They were able to see the lawmaking process firsthand, and that's something that we were proud of our kids to be able to do.
Well, I want to make sure we have money in the budget for tobacco cessation. We changed it a few years ago, and you was quite concerned, but I made sure that the job was going to get done, and I applaud the Hancock Regional Hospital here for what they're giving back to the community, and the students you bring out there is a testimonial for tobacco cessation coalitions going on, and they're wonderful, and we want people to live longer.
So every couple of years, Brandy has to submit a grant proposal to the state in order to get funding for the coalition for the next 2 years. And it is a monstrosity of a task for her to do, and the details that she has to go through and basically sell to the state to get the funds has been increasingly difficult through the years. And it takes a lot of time, and she needs a lot of guidance from a professional standpoint. So we always meet at least a couple of times around that time to go over those kind of things. And then we've had other opportunities. Brandy and I have been able to go around to schools in the county, high schools and middle schools, and talk to them about smoking and vaping and all the reasons why they should not do those things. And that's been very effective, I think, and something I've taken a lot of pride and joy doing. And I attend meetings when I'm able to, but I always keep up with what's going on through Brandy, and actually now through the hospital has been increasingly more vocal about what the coalition's been able to do, and that's been great.
When you look at the big picture of what impact has tobacco control work or tobacco prevention and cessation work made in our country, in our state, in our community, when looking at the impact, are we a healthier community? Are we a better place to live? Let's hear from a few people right now.
So I think the longevity is probably the most important part. Really often in these types of programs, you see a lot of transition within the coordinator's positions. You see a lot of, really change in ideas and what the priorities may be. And I think the consistency of message over those 20 plus years has been really important. Folks that are looking for resources can find them easily within the community, and that ability to tell your friends and relatives who may be looking for some help with smoking cessation, being able to say, well, I know where to go to get that, those resources is very important.
I have watched the coalition do some very, very difficult things. There have been moments in the last 8 years where some of the things that we've tried to do have been in jeopardy. And as we all know, the ability to smoke and the freedom to smoke wherever you want and use tobacco is one of those things that can be contentious at times. But the coalition has held firm and held steady and had been reasonable as well, as we have attempted to ensure that this county remains smoke-free, and certainly our hospital will always remain that way, thanks to the work of the people on the coalition.
I would definitely say just seeing the number of people that are aware of what some of the dangers are, and obviously many years ago tobacco was definitely the main focus of this, and I think you can probably say just the number of tobacco users we see, especially with school age kids, has gone down. Unfortunately, there's some other things that have kind of come onto the scene with vaping and things like that have sort of replaced those. But I think just having seen some of those changes and kids being aware of that, and parents knowing they have resources that are out there, schools knowing they have resources that they can reach out to in the community to be able to address some of these issues that we're seeing with our kids.
When we first started down this road, I think that if I remember right, if you looked at the state of Indiana and you looked at Hancock County, the incidence of smoking in the county was in the 32-33% range, if I remember right. And what we have so much to be proud of is, I don't know exactly where it is today because I haven't looked at those numbers lately, but I know that when I was looking at them before I retired, the incidence of smoking was down to around 20% or so, or 18%, in the mid-teens. Just think about that. You talk about the impact on the state of Indiana. Think about that. If you've dropped the incidence of smoking all the way from up in the 30, 31, 32% range, all the way down to the mid-teens, and think about how much healthcare dollars that's actually saved this state. I mean, we know that for a smoker, their healthcare cost is 30-35% greater than the non-smoker. And you start adding that up, and that's millions of dollars. And so to be able to improve the health status not only of Hancock County but the state of Indiana, and to get those healthcare costs down, we've saved a lot of dollars, and we have saved people a lot of pain and suffering.
I think to our community, this work has meant a great deal. I still remember back in 2006 and 7 when first talks came about of a smoke-free air law in the city of Greenfield. I'd say that that is some of the most memorable time for me in this work, partly because there were such strong feelings about this issue, and day and night I received phone calls and emails and people trying to find me in the community somewhere to talk to me about the issue. And what I remember most about the difference it made at this community in the end, when that law passed, that ordinance passed for the city of Greenfield to have smoke-free air provisions, at least in most of the workplaces, I had people come up to me and say, even if I don't agree with this. Even if I don't agree with government regulating smoking in public places, this is the first time we've seen people really come out in the community for a cause, especially young people. We saw teenagers come out and testify or sit in the chairs or on the floor at City Hall, and they spoke and they had posters and they shared their stories and they shared their commitment. And it would be kind of hard to look at the community and the level of support a movement had like that and not say yes. And it truly was the beginning of the provisions that followed the Cumberland smoke-free ordinance, and then the Hancock County countywide ordinance. The health department stepped forward and said, this needs to be a health code. We need to protect everyone in this county. And by their wisdom in coming forward and working with us on proposing it as a health code, we now have protections for virtually every worker in Hancock County. And so I think that the difference that has made to have people come up to me and say, you know, my children don't know what it's like to have to go into a smoke-filled restaurant or a smoke-filled shopping center or something like that. And they talk about how much they appreciate when they would travel out of state and they would pull up to a restaurant and somebody would say smoking or non, and they would be like, what? That's still a thing, you know, in some places across the country. And so I think that creating those kinds of environments for a new generation are policymakers who had the foresight and to say yes to that and truly create a healthier community, I think has, you know, spearheaded to where we are today, working on population health and just trying to encourage folks, educate and advocate in making healthier decisions for themselves and for their families and for our community to make it a better place to live. So after 20 years of tobacco prevention and cessation work in Hancock County, people often ask, what difference has it made? Show us data, tell us stories, show us some real results here in Hancock County. Here's just a few of those right now.
The smoke-free indoor air law passage, ordinance passage here in the community was the biggest thing that happened, and that's been over 20 years ago now. Seeing that strengthened again where they included the vape products a couple of years back when that became the rage in the community. Everybody was going to vapes, and then they were trying to do it inside and saying it didn't match with the indoor air law that we had. That's been the biggest. I think the other thing that a lot of people don't understand is the importance of the education that's given in the classrooms, educating our young people on the dangers of tobacco use, the dangers of cigarettes, the dangers of the vape products, the dangers of all the other products they have now, the dissolvables. I mean, you can do just about and find just about any product you want, and whether it's nicotine, THC, or anything. Now you can find lots of different products, and I think it's important for the younger students to understand the dangers of that, so hopefully they won't ever pick it up and start and then begin down that path of addiction.
I mean, we ended up, I remember Mark, my husband, calling me and saying, you know, I've been contacted and this is what they're looking to do and want to make it a smoke-free restaurant, and would we be on board? And it was tricky. It was tricky way 20 years ago, right? That smoke-free, that wasn't something that people were doing at the time. I agreed that it was a good choice, but we had a lot complain, and you know, it was several said they would never come back because we made that choice, and there were other restaurants, you know, that would let them smoke. So we had to live through all of that, but years later, I can proudly say they still come in, even though they did go through a period where they refused. So it was a good decision. It really was.
I think the difference is self-evident when you start to look at the access to care. When you're creating advocates, you're creating access to all of these points of care, whether it's referral to the quit line, whether it's getting folks involved in the mission of continuing to keep this at the top of mind. All of that creates the opportunity surface area for our friends, our neighbors, our loved ones to finally say, you know what, I do want to quit. Or, you know what, my business should be a place where you don't have to worry about that. Or, I would like to offer housing to people where you don't have to worry about whether or not your asthmatic child can breathe in this setting, which I think is just an incredibly eye-opening example to broaden the way that we think about the cascade of consequences. So again, I think that's just a testament to the strength and the longevity of what it has done in the community. I think it's no doubt made a difference in so many lives.
I've heard stories from my tobacco coordinator about how when they first began, Applebee's had like a smoking place in it. Of course, I wasn't even around then, like I didn't know about that. And just seeing that change in just the time that I've been alive, it has really made a difference. And continuously it growing as I've gotten older, you can see. And I think that especially in Greenfield, it needs to be something that's on the forefront of people's mind to help make the change that students are using these products, adults are using these products that are harmful to them without their knowledge, and they're being targeted. And so it's really important for us to help make that change, because it is possible. We've seen it.
I think the most important thing is we're just bringing about awareness. I think people have just always taken for granted that smoking's out there, and it is what it is. And I think that education is just where it really needs to be, and starting younger has been better. If we can get kids to say, hey, that really isn't a good idea, there's nothing beneficial to this, and we can keep them away from it, then hopefully that'll also help with other drugs. Knowing that it's a gateway drug, if we can convince them to stay away from that, then maybe we can make even more differences.
Well, again, the accomplishments, I think having one of the strongest smoke-free workplace ordinances in the state, and that becoming a model ordinance for other communities. I mean, they have looked to us to help them go smoke-free. So, I mean, I think that says a lot about us and about you as far as, wanting to get the best for this community. Our ability to have a really good working relationship with our representatives and our senators as they've changed over the years. Over the 20 years, we've had different ones that we've had to work with, and we've had a good relationship with all of them. And not every community has that. And I think that has been our strength and a benefit to us, that we have a good relationship, that they will listen to our guidance as far as good policy and what is best for the community.
I think this program has made a huge difference in the community. I think we're a healthier place to live and work and go to school. We have one of the strongest smoke-free air laws in the entire state of Indiana. And our workers no longer have to choose between their health and a paycheck. Our children no longer know what it's like to have to enter the workforce in an environment and have to choose between, smoking and non-smoking to protect their health and to survive. I think that we have a lot of young people whose lives have been impacted by education in the schools and prevention. And there have been so many people who have been helped, quit smoking or quit tobacco use in general, or quit vaping by resources such as the Indiana Tobacco Quit Line and programs the hospital has done, and virtual programs that now exist that weren't around 20 years ago to help people quit.
Behind the scenes, or the smaller pieces that really are big, is the work with employers trying to, create policies for workplace settings for their employees to be encouraged to quit smoking. The smoke-free work with multi-housing units, also the work in the schools that are being done. So how are we teaching our kiddos to know what's happening, but also how to say no, how to know what their risks are if they start using tobacco. So for me, those are the pieces that I've seen the work that's being done, but also the importance of moving forward is we still have kids that are struggling with tobacco issues. We still have multi-housing units that, people go in, move in, and they can smell the smoke from the tenants before them. And so making sure we're working together to make our community a healthier place speaks to the importance of the work that is being done by the coalition, but also why it's not just a one and done kind of thing. It's not just, we have a comprehensive smoke-free air policy, we can wipe our hands clean and move on. There's still work to be done.
So people often ask, why is tobacco prevention and cessation work important in the community? Why is it needed? Where do we see its work happening here in Hancock County? Let's hear from a few people on what they think.
As we look towards the next 5 years in particular, really, engaging more and more deeply into communities that are most impacted. We've had some success over the years in lowering tobacco use rates, but there are still, the tobacco industry continues to target young people, community of color, those with mental health challenges, and we, as leaders in the community, are anxious and eager to work with organizations who serve those communities, who are from those communities, to work alongside them, to be supportive and meet them where they are. And that's where I hope we're able to really make some changes moving forward, and again, be the leaders for that.
Well, I think that the tobacco companies are very creative, and they have seen their market whittle away and dry up, and they knew that they had to get a new generation of folks into the use of tobacco and nicotine, and so they have refocused away from cigarettes, although they're still clearly doing that, and smokeless products, into vaping. And it is appalling to me the kind of efforts that are made to induce young people into this world. And frankly, I look at the things that are out there, and it is so blatantly clear that they are after the kids that it kind of makes my heart sick to think that. And as the research is coming out showing what the impact is of vaping, and knowing that these kids are getting hooked on nicotine at a very young age, and that the laws are very slow to catch up, I think this needs to be one of the top priorities that we have, especially for our state government.
Well, I think the cessation rates that we've had in the county is great. I think the schooling rates have been very good. The reality of what I look at with the Tobacco Free Coalition is, if it did not exist, I think in our county, being as rural that it is in areas, is people would just do what they want because they don't want to accept responsibility of their own actions. The reality of the big problems that we have is dealing with coping. So people smoke, they vape, they try to use those things to get out of their reality and not think about problems in their lives. And I think with the Tobacco Free Coalition, especially dealing with the juveniles going around, because you got to understand, when you're talking to the kids are going home and talking to the adults. And that's a big deal because I think the adults really don't want to hear about it, but when your kid is saying it over and over again, they're actually going to start listening.
As workers and as customers, you should have that right to be in a smokeless environment, and especially as workers, because we don't have the opportunity to walk away from that table. We don't have an opportunity to pick a table if it's smoking or not. And a lot of people say, well, you chose that profession. And that's true, because people choose professions because of money. People who work at the casino make great money, and they're trying to provide for their family. Now, it's a job, and especially when you're young, you don't go into that job thinking about smoke. But as you get older, you do, because it really starts to affect your health. So, and as a former worker of the casino, I just feel like it should be completely smoke-free.
Well, obviously, the use of tobacco, certainly long-term, has tremendous effects on a person's overall health. And I think it probably hit me the most when I was working at the hospital, and I would see somebody walking to the door, smoking a cigarette all the way to the door, and then going in and getting a breathing treatment because they were in stages of COPD or some other ailment. But I think working around the hospital, you realize it's not just your breathing that's affected, it's all the other, organs in your body that are affected by the use of tobacco. And so anything we can do to help folks live a longer, healthier life, I think is well worth our time and effort.
We are bombarded here in Indiana by millions and millions of dollars from the big tobacco. And the money that we have to fight against that is pennies, compared to their millions. And so, like I said, it is just an everyday fight to educate, and they're always coming out with new products that we have to then go back and re-educate the community on, re-educate the youth, re-educate our elected officials. So it's it's just nonstop. Even though we have a strong ordinance, we still have to educate some of our legislators as to why to keep it a strong ordinance, and that has been kind of a fight for us as well too.
Well, for the first thing is, I think that it's good for not only my kids, my family, that we're able to go into a restaurant or a store or a place, a public place, and not have to face that challenge of, you know, are we going to smell like it? Where am I going to be at? What am I going to be breathing? How's this going to be? And I'm very thankful that problem has been taken away, and they are now breathing clean air, fresh air. That is probably the biggest of all of my time as a county commissioner or as a police officer. I think that was my biggest accomplishment that I was able to do for this community, was to help establish that ordinance.
I'm always impressed by the coalition's accomplishments from the standpoint of, one, the sheer power of advocacy that they bring with the number of voices, the change that they can affect. And number two, I think a great testament to that, even recently, is the willingness to take this not just in our community but to the state level, to raise awareness and advocacy and on the legislative side about how important this is, and keeping that conversation at the forefront of our minds. Especially, could not be a more appropriate time coming out of a global respiratory pandemic to continue to talk about how this is not something that we need to keep on the back burner. It's not something we have to think is a solved problem. It's changed, it's morphed, and I've been impressed with how the coalition has continued to adapt to the changing landscape of both the threats that it poses, but also what it means for our community here in Hancock County.
But the Anti-Tobacco Coalition is a way to spread the word out on a community level, and it really supports my practice, and I more and more have patients that have heard of the efforts of the coalition and also been able to get some support from them through different sources the community and the state provides. Coalition makes both known and available to the community, and it gives me a platform too to talk to the coalition at times and community members about the importance. There's nothing more important in my mind as a lung specialist in addressing the smoking issue.
I think the work is still important to the community because we still have people using tobacco and vaping products. And I think the end goal always in tobacco control is to someday dream of seeing that rate be 0%. We have a vaping epidemic among our youth. Our smoking rate among youth was practically non-existent about 10 years ago. And then vaping came on the market, and we're seeing use rates among teenagers higher than we ever saw the smoking rates. And for adults too, the smoking rate, tobacco use rate is still higher than we'd like to see it. Tobacco use is still the #1 preventable cause of disease and death in the United States. And I think that we have to continue to pursue that. We have to continue to work as a community in the end to help save lives. So after 20 years of tobacco-free coalition work in Hancock County, and so many people in our community contributing to that work and being a part of it, we wanted to do some flashbacks or throwbacks and hear from people who have been involved in different ways over the last 2 decades and hear about some of their favorite memories.
You know, there are so many events that are out there and so much work that has been done, but I would say really that the work that has been done around vaping is one of my fondest memories, because we have been able to introduce this idea to the folks in our county that vaping is a risk and that our kids are very much at risk. And you have led that charge to ensure that people can understand the impact of all of this and the things that we can all do together to limit that. So I would say that that's the top good memory. That, you know, there are other memories around how we fight to preserve our status as a smoke-free and tobacco-free community. But those efforts have been very, very good.
I think one of my favorite moments was my senior year of high school. We got connected with a larger nationwide movement that was targeting smoking in movies and really trying to get movie studios and movie producers to cut tobacco out of movies, especially movies that kids were watching, because there was all kinds of data showing the influence that it had on kids. And we convinced the state program here in Indiana to send us to this really big activism event that they were hosting in New York City, and we protested outside of some media companies in New York City and got to meet a lot of youth from all over the country, and particularly in New York, who were involved in the same work that we were doing. But we got to take a group from here in Indiana all the way to New York City to kind of show people what a group of really determined kids can do when they all get together, and I think it was a really good opportunity for the kids here in Greenfield to see that, like, they could have that kind of impact on a nationwide scale just by getting involved in something simple like that.
I think our partnership and with not just our coalitions together, but with the schools coming on board and really approaching us and wanting to make sure that their students are educated in the dangers of the drugs that we cover. Obviously the ones we collaborate with and cover with the vaping and nicotine products, but overall it seems like the education that we're able to do in the schools together seems to be having a larger impact than we could have individually.
I think some of the friends I have made has become a super big memory, and just making new friends that I never would have met. As a Voice member, you get to collaborate with all different schools from Hancock County, so that's like Eastern, New Pal, Mount Vernon, and Greenfield. And these people I never would have met that shared the same ideas as me, and we meet together monthly, pretty much every other week, so we get to really talk and discuss our goals as a group.
My favorite memory is being at the County Commissioners meeting back in 2008. Well, a long time ago, 2008, watching the coalition in action with all the members showing up en masse, dressed in a red shirt, and giving their pleas to the commission to consider this, and seeing it happen, and the celebration of the coalition when it all happened and it was signed. Another memory is when I was given a surprise award at the annual coalition meeting. That meant a lot to me because I think a lot of the coalition, and it really was a very special thing, and I still have that plaque on my wall in my office.
I have a couple of favorite memories, I guess. I'm trying to encapsulate 20 years. I think one of my favorite memories, I've talked about, the city of Greenfield, but I think I will never forget some sights and sounds in the Greenfield City Hall that night when that smoke-free air ordinance passed. And just the level of excitement, the tears on both sides of the issue, the awareness that a huge thing had been done, and it was a huge step forward for our community. And that's one of my favorite memories. One of my other favorite memories is back in 2009. I got to travel to New York City with a group of youth from Greenfield Central High School that were active in the Voice movement. And so we traveled to New York City and joined with a reality check movement there to visit movie industry and entertainment industry companies to raise awareness of how youth are being targeted in the media. And so we were outside the Today Show and advocated there and in front of some of the companies there, and in Central Park they had a rally or an advocacy movement there, and due to the kindness and willingness of one of the parents, Kim Kyle, was a counselor at Greenfield Central High School, and her daughter Emily was a national campaign for tobacco-free kids Youth Advocate of the Year. And because of that hard work and the credibility that our youth had, we got to make that trip and join in making a difference at something on the national level. So I would say, the pride in those two things are some of my favorite memories. I'd like to extend a huge thank you to everyone who took the time to be part of our 20th Coalition anniversary video. So many people that have been involved over the last 20 years came and spent some time with us to make this happen today. So I want to extend a huge thank you. Thank you for all that you've given. Thank you for all that you've done, because we would not be where we are today celebrating 20 years if it wasn't for all of you.